Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to continue down that vein. You have been here sitting today, Director Cheadle, definitively able to dismiss erroneous information and speculation. However, you are refusing to answer questions that we now know that you have the information for. You are saying that you are wanting to answer questions that the Secret Service has information to. Well, ma'am, you are the Secret Service. You are the director. You have said that you are the best for the job. So, I'm going to ask you some questions now knowing that you do have answers from the FBI, whom you have been passing the buck to this entire day. And I'll start with something that, maybe the FBI doesn't know because it has to do with you personally. You said you spoke with President Trump after the assassination attempt. And I want to know, did you apologize to him directly for nearly having President Trump killed?
Yes, I did.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that you recognize that this was your failure. Now, since the assassination attempt, you are under oath, reminding you, have you communicated with anyone at the White House on an encrypted messaging app like Signal? Yes or no?
No, I have not.
Are you willing to surrender your personal phone for analysis?
If I am required to do so.
Okay. I will look into making that request because I would like to see your personal phone to see if you're communicating over encrypted messaging apps. Have you ever turned down enhanced security requests from Donald Trump's detail, his special agent in charge, Sean Curran? Have you ever turned that down?
No, I have not.
Have there been, has your team, has the Secret Service? Maybe not you personally.
I believe, as I mentioned earlier, there are times when requests are made for
And you
assets,
have denied them. They have been denied.
And a denial doesn't
Has the Trump
necessarily
campaign
mean,
made requests for additional assets that have been denied?
Denial doesn't mean vulnerability.
Have there been additional requests for enhanced security at Mar-a-Lago?
We have made a number of enhancements to
You confirmed that there were
security.
bomb-sniffing dogs that were provided. You failed to confirm if there were aerial security surveillance assets that were provided. So yes or no, was that provided?
At the rally?
At the rally, yes, ma'am.
We had Overwatch provided at the rally.
You've confirmed that the assassin was identified as suspicious 57 minutes prior to the shooting. Was the suspicious individual ever approached by an agent? Was any contact ever made with him?
Not to my knowledge.
Is that the standard protocol for someone who is identified as suspicious?
The protocol would be to locate the individual and
And you said that
conduct
he
an
was
interview.
located 2 to 5 times approximately?
No, I said that the information was passed potentially somewhere between 2 to 5
And he was never
times.
located by an agent?
To my knowledge, that individual was not located by an agent.
We have dozens of rally goers who have identified him and not one agent on the ground. There are many, many, many agents on the ground, local law enforcement, Secret Service. No one was able to identify him and have sights on and see him.
What I'm saying is that the agents that were on the ground at the time, I have no knowledge that they were able to interview him or locate him.
Thank you. Was there a local law enforcement officer who approached the roof and saw the shooter and saw that he was present on the roof?
That is the information that has been shared with me.
Have you spoke to that local law enforcement officer?
No, I have not.
Are you going to?
It is part of a criminal investigation that the
Are you going to-
FBI is interviewing those individuals.
Were agents stationed on the water tower?
No,
Why?
that would not be something that would be included in a security plan.
Has the man who is reported to have been present wearing a gray suit who allegedly requested a photo of the dead body of the assassin on top of the AGR roof been identified?
I don't have that information.
Is that something that you've heard of?
No.
Were ATF agents present at the rally?
To attend or to work?
To work.
Not to my knowledge.
How long did the counter sniper have crooks in his sights before the shooter opened fire on President Trump?
I don't have that specific timeline.
Will you be able to tell us if he communicated with other agents on what he was seeing through his sites?
Once I have that information, absolutely.
Because we need to know why he waited for multiple rounds to be fired at President Trump before the threat was neutralized. We need to know if he was given an order to hold fire. Now, you've excused the roof of being unmanned because of the slope of the roof. Do you continue to assert the slope of the roof as a credible reason for leaving this position undefended?
First, I'll go back and correct that there was no order to hold fire. Our agents and officers have the ability to neutralize a threat at the time
So you
that
don't
they
know,
see it.
I'm sorry, you don't know the communication that was taking place or how long he had him at his sites because you haven't spoke to him, but you do know that there was no order to hold fire.
I can tell you the way that our personnel are trained. They are trained on the use of force scale, that when they see a threat, they are authorized to neutralize that threat. They don't have to ask for permission.
You excuse the roof being unmanned because of the slope. Do you stand by that assertion?
The roof was not covered with an individual on it because there was overwatch provided.
Apparently not. No, there was no overwatch provided. This is very evident. President Trump was shot. A man died. There was no oversight provided. I find this rather maddening, especially now knowing that you do have answers from the FBI, who you have been passing the buck to this entire hearing, not answering a congressional hearing, members of Congress, while you are under oath and under a subpoena. I find it maddening that the director, that our country has come centimeters away from oblivion under your watch. You have answers. You are refusing to give those to us, directing us to the FBI, and this entire thing is a waste of time. You are responsible for the loss of a life and the shooting that took place on President Trump. You do need to resign. This is bipartisan. You need to be fired. You do not need to hold this position. You are not the best for this job. I am over my time, but I cannot tolerate your watch any longer, and I'm going to continue to call daily for you to be removed from your position, ma'am.
Chair recognizes Mr. Fry from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today, in particular Kathleen Sagama from Western Energy Alliance. Ms. Sagama, thank you so much for everything that you do on behalf of America's hard-working energy producers. Colorado's Western Slope used to have a booming energy economy. Unfortunately, we've been regulated into poverty by bad Democrat policies. I remember our booming economy because Roughnecks used to come into my restaurant, and I knew I was having a good day when I would find mud on the floor from their boots. They were coming and patronizing my business and spending money there, but they were all forced out of our areas and onto other parts of America. There used to be 112 rigs on the Western Slope, but now we only have 4 drilling rigs. Now, not in my backyard extremists and job-killing federal policies have driven away those good-paying jobs. The Bureau of Land Management's draft resource management plan for the Colorado River Valley office and Grand Junction field office is the latest fossil fuels attack. This proposed land grab could remove over 1.6 million acres of public lands in Colorado from future oil and gas leasing and establish 9 different areas of critical environmental concern on over 100,000 acres of BLM land. If this proposal is finalized, the United States will lose access to vital energy resources, many more than the 600 fewer wells projected by the agency to be lost by 2043. The consequences will be felt far beyond the state of Colorado, where residents will lose their livelihoods and see increased gas and energy prices. BLM is proposing to close all areas with no known low and moderate oil and gas development potential. and is basing its analysis of the oil and gas potential on out-of-date information that does not take into consideration modern technology. The Permian Basin was once thought to be low to medium, and now it's the highest producing oil field in the world. As a result, the Permian Basin would be closed if this proposal had been in place in New Mexico and Texas prior to the significant amount of production that is now occurring. This proposed land grab is nothing short of partisan politics meant to further restrict access to the oil and natural gas development that could reinvigorate the economy of Colorado and help ensure energy security for all Americans. There are already stringent standards and requirements in place for oil and gas producers that aim at reducing environmental and cultural impacts. And guess what? No one does it better than American oil and gas workers. We produce the world's cleanest, safest, most efficient energy in the world. This proposed rule is yet another blatant land grab designed to dismantle the fossil fuel industry and force a Green New Deal transition, funded by you, the taxpayers, by the way, closing the door on over 1.6 million acres of vital public lands for energy development is not just an issue of economics, it's a threat to our nation's energy independence and security, and we should be pursuing energy dominance. We have the capability to export freedom around the globe. This proposed RMP goes beyond necessary environmental considerations and instead seeks to restrict access to promising resources, hindering the potential for economic growth and prosperity, particularly in the western slope of Colorado. Rogue bureaucrats at the BLM shouldn't be unilaterally locking up more land in Colorado. It's urgent that we block this overreach and prioritize responsible energy production to lower gas prices, utility bills, and protect good-paying jobs in Colorado and throughout America. In this committee, we hear a lot of extremists pushing the Green New Deal agenda, and I believe that it's very disingenuous because they don't want to pursue nuclear, which is the greenest and cleanest of them all. They don't want to address the carbon emissions that are produced by wildfires and allowing us to be good stewards of our land and managing our forests, and instead would rather have 40,000 children mining with their bare hands for cobalt in the Congo and China-owned mines, rather than producing the world's best, cleanest energy right here in America. Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I yield.
Thank you, Representative Boebert. I now recognize Representative Hageman for 5 minutes on H.R. 6085.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to testify on my bill to prohibit the...
Mr. Garcia.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight has been very interesting. I want to just take a moment just to put today in context. We're here right now at this late hour to accommodate the majority's field trip to praise their leader. And let's not forget that he left office in disgrace. Yes, gentle lady from Georgia, we're going to talk about that Donald Trump, who stole classified materials and stored them in his bathroom. He was investigated and indicted for his crimes. Now, Attorney General Garland set up a parallel investigation of President Biden's handling of classified documents as well. And that shows the Department of Justice is actually fair and independent. So to oversee this investigation, he appointed Robert Hur, a former U.S. attorney handpicked by Donald Trump. Robert Hur found no wrongdoing by President Biden. No wrongdoing by President Biden. But he chose to smear President Biden with a totally unprofessional and wrong assessment of the president's age and mental sharpness. Now, as we know, his assessment about President Biden was wrong because you can literally yourself read the transcript, which is over 250 pages long. Now, many of us, especially us Democrats, know the president. He is sharp. He is focused on the big issues. He's dealing with large challenges across the world. Now, the majority is hyping up this issue to distract us from the fact that Donald Trump keeps embarrassing himself in public. And as much as the gentle lady from Georgia and others may not like it, we know that Trump's public statements have been crazy and incoherent for years. And we know that he is too tired and sleepy to stay awake through his own criminal trial. It's not President Biden who's not sharp. It's, in fact, Donald Trump. Now, let's look at public reporting. I'm only going to talk about public reporting. His criminal trial started on April 15th, and here's a summary of the press reports. On his first day of his trial, Reuters reported that Trump appeared to doze off during jury selection. On April 16th, it was reported that Trump dropped his head inside the courtroom, keeping his eyes closed before jolting his head upright. On April 19th, the New York Times reported Trump's eyes remained, quote, closed for extended periods during the final day of jury selection. On April 22nd, MSNBC reported that Trump's lawyers were fighting to keep him awake. On April 30th, NBC and the New York Times reported that Trump nodded off for significant portions of witness testimony, and as we all know, basically kept his eyes closed for hours and hours on end. On May 9th, Trump's eyes remained closed for many minutes, and Trump later, of course, dozed on and off. And the reports go on and on. May 13th, Trump was, quote, asleep during the afternoon session. On May 14th, a political reporter said Trump slouched in his seat and closed his eyes and his mouth. Now, here we have a photo of Donald Trump, of course, through some of his trial. And I bring this up because it's Donald Trump that's asleep and that's hurting and dividing our country. And this attack on President Biden and his mental acuteness or his ability or his age is completely just a reason and an excuse for the Republicans to continue to attack President Biden when we all know that Donald Trump is the one that's unfit to be president. And that's why the majority is so desperate to be here today, because they want to help him get elected and hurt President Biden. Well, it's not going to work, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself first to offer an amendment. The clerk will distribute the amendment to all members. No, we're not done. We're not done. I'm just going to do an amendment, and then we'll have all the debate we want. And I know Mr. Goldman has an amendment he wants to offer. Ms. Luna has an amendment. And
The first part for the amendment.
We can go back to time on the A&S.
yeah, we can go back. Everybody will have an opportunity to talk. We're just going to go ahead and do the amendment in nature substitute. The clerk, does everyone have a copy? Okay, Ms. Boebert, I have to allow people to speak on the A&S if they want right now, so I will recognize you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just want to apologize to the American people. I don't think that this is the best use of our time when we are squabbling. It's one thing to have fun and laugh as members of Congress and try to find humor or some sort of lightheartedness in what we are doing. But when things get as heated as they have, it's unfortunately an embarrassment on our body as a whole. And so I just want to personally apologize to the American people for that. But we are here to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress for ignoring subpoenas and believing that he is above the law. We simply want to hear what was said in the interview that was transcribed. Yes, we have the transcriptions, but the White House has recently edited President Biden's mistakes by labeling them, quote, inaudible in transcripts. The committee members must be able to assess for themselves that the transcripts accurately reflects the true content of the interviews. Now, the American people, fortunate or unfortunate, have heard Joe Biden speak for over 3 years now, really, if you include the campaign, about 4 years. And we have witnessed in real time a massive cognitive decline. President Trump, when he was in office, he underwent testing for his cognitive dissonance, for his ability to function as President of the United States, as the Commander-in-Chief. And unfortunately, I haven't seen Joe Biden even read a teleprompter properly and get through the reading without also adding in what's in the brackets when he needs to take a pause. And there are many things that we could go on here, but I want to hear the inflections in Joe Biden's responses when he is answering these questions. Now, on February 27th, 2024, the Oversight Committee issued a subpoena for relevant information regarding the special counsel's investigation, including the transcript and any recordings of the special counsel's interviews with President Biden in October of 2023. Now, to date, the Department of Justice has refused to provide the committee the audio recordings. It's a very simple request. It can be provided at any time, but maybe, just maybe, this administration that has tried to cover up so much and tried to physically lift up Joe Biden and keep him upright is hiding even more. So we just want to hear how that interview actually went. I am in favor of moving forward to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. I think there are many other things that we need to have him in for and move forward on in holding him accountable. I mean, he's gone after so many American citizens, moms and dads who attend school board meetings, those of the Catholic faith. The DOJ has been completely weaponized, and it's very sad for our country. But this hearing will continue. We have many amendments. I'm sure there will be much dialogue. Hopefully, there is some decorum on both sides of the aisle. And if in my remaining 1 minute, I could request, every so often, Mr. Garcia, maybe you could just lift up that picture of our President Trump sleeping. As you say, I think he's praying. But if he is sleeping, he certainly looks pretty while he sleeps. Maybe it's an endearing moment of prayer, though. I know when I fall asleep on airplanes, my mouth kind of drops open, and his mouth is kind of tight-lipped. So maybe it's just a somber moment of
He's
thought.
sleeping. It's been reported by multiple press outlets.
I was in the
that he's
courtroom
actually
today,
sleeping.
and I could see why someone would fall asleep, just like George Conway fell asleep today. In the court hearing. It's kind of slow in there. It's not as exciting as the House Oversight Committee, but I just wanted to say that's a lovely picture you have of President Trump, Mr. Garcia. Thank you, and I yield.
Gentlelady yields back. Does any other member wish to speak on the underlying?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses, especially General Manager Horrell, who traveled all the way from Oregon to be here today. Thank you so much. General Manager Horrell, you discussed how my bill would designate the Power Resources Office in Reclamation's Denver headquarters as the lead office for hydropower development, and said, quote, "This provision intends to set up a centralized location for uniformity purposes, yet does not prohibit area offices from implementing specific hydropower development," end quote. Can you elaborate on how having one centralized location as the lead office for hydropower development will reduce the time and associated costs for new hydropower projects?
Yeah, good question. What we're looking for is transparency, and we're looking for efficiencies. And I think that would bring to the table, we lose a lot when we're talking to multiple people and getting multiple answers at different times. So it's kind of bring me a rock, bring me another rock. And we're looking at making that efficiency help the Bureau as well as help us get through faster and more efficiently, which will save money.
Thank you very much. We certainly love transparency, efficiency, and expedience. 4 years and $2.1 million for NEPA for the canal piping and hydro projects that you discussed in your testimony is discouraging. And it seems like your irrigation district could have really benefited from the provisions in my bill if we had passed this a little bit sooner. Now, General Manager Horrell, can you further discuss how my bill would ensure that there will be no financial and operational impacts to existing water users with the development of the new hydropower authorization by this legislation?
In my experience, what we do is we generate revenue that brings in to help keep our costs down, keep our rates low for our end users, our farmers. These projects that we build are paid for by generating hydro revenue within my district, and it is at a no cost to the patrons.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here and your testimony and for answering so many questions. Deputy Commissioner Palumbo, thank you also for being here today, and all of Reclamation's technical assistance in drafting this important bill. You touched on it in your testimony, but could you also please elaborate on how this bill will spur additional non-federal hydropower development in reclamation projects?
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Boebert. As you identified, streamlining is fundamental to implementing projects. So right now, we currently implement projects with FERC authority as well as the LISA Power Privilege Authority. This would centralize the authority under LISA Power Privilege, making it very clear to work with Reclamation on developing hydropower, both federal and non-federal, on reclamation lands. So that envelope of our lands that we have, our facilities that we have, we would use one authority, that would be LISA Power Privilege, centralized through our Power Resources Office, making it very efficient to move through the process of implementing projects as quickly as possible, as smartly as possible, and as strategically as possible.
Yes, thank you. I would agree with that. Just the fast track of streamlining this, having that one authority, it being centralized, and streamlining a permitting process that can typically be very burdensome at times. Obviously, I mean, that sounds like a wonderful thing that we should be working on. And I think that this will accomplish more for our stakeholders on the ground in states like Colorado. Now, can you elaborate on the importance of and benefits associated with existing hydropower and the need for new hydropower to be encouraged and developed at a larger scale?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. We often talk about wind and solar coming online. We consider that a variable resource. Hydropower is the ability to backstop, to stabilize the grid very quickly when that variable resource might drop out. So it enables solar and wind to be generated, and also with hydropower backstopping it, it stabilizes the grid, providing overall value to all the beneficiaries of that particular section of the grid. So it provides a tremendous benefit by stabilizing the system and speeding up implementation of future projects.
Yes, and my time has expired. Mr. Chairman, since we kind of have a smaller group, may I ask General Manager Horrell one more question? Okay, thank you. General Manager Horrell, you discussed the current challenges with hydropower development on reclamation facilities. Can you please elaborate on how the White House Council on Environmental Quality final rule, the final rule implementing phase 2 of significant revisions to NEPA regulations will further complicate an already daunting NEPA process, cause further litigation, increase costs, and provide further regulatory uncertainty that undermines hydropower development?
I can't comment specifically on that rule because I'm not as familiar with it, but I can talk about NEPA and how I've had to deal with that. NEPA has added cost, time, and these projects have a small margin to get done. It's not that we're not trying to follow all the rules. I just think that there's a lot of time involved and money that gets added on. We have a collaborative basin, and when you have a collaborative basin that puts water back in for species, we think that we're doing good things, and we continue to do those, and we believe we're following what the species need. So in my case, anything that we can do to speed these processes up makes our projects more affordable.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the chairman and the ranking member for allowing me to go over my time. We'll discuss this further when we mark up this legislation. Thank you all.
Thank you. The Chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Deputy Commissioner.
Energy sources. Without objection, it will be entered. We will now recognize Representative Boebert for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. I appreciate you coming out here. In Colorado, we are and have been facing historic drought and wildfire crises, and instead of allowing us to solve these issues through developing critical water storage, the water supply projects, or actively managing our forests, which is something I'm very passionate about, especially in Colorado, where we have just so much national forest lands. Democrats want to blame climate change, and they delay these critical projects indefinitely. The current permitting process under NEPA is unworkable, and I'm proud to support Chairman Westerman's much-needed reforms to this very broken process. It's something that I've encountered struggles and difficulties with on a regular basis throughout Western Colorado and the Western United States even. Mr. Pugh, you mentioned that current NEPA regulations trigger litigation that burdens smaller rural communities, many of which I represent in Colorado. And meanwhile, we have larger, more resourced communities that may be able to afford sufficient legal representation. So could you just expand upon how frivolous these frivolous lawsuits can slow down, add costs, or even block important water and infrastructure projects?
Certainly. As I stated before, as soon as you add NEPA into the process, you're looking at least a 25% gain on how much your project is going to cost. A lot of our rural and smaller communities simply don't have the resources to be able to fund that additional 25% on top of their projects. And in most cases, they do not have the expertise on staff, so we wind up immediately having to go outside and hire outside help.
Yes, and so some seemingly simple projects may even be intimidating for small tribal and rural communities that are concerned about going through NEPA to even begin that process. And with this, when you state the federal funds that are introduced and at least the 25% increase that you just mentioned in a project budget, would you just expand a little bit more on how that does impact those rural communities, our tribes, and just smaller areas?
Again, the additional 25% just right off the top, adding to the cost. And also for us, whenever we would go into the NEPA process, our contracts with our outside consulting engineers and environmental people were open-ended because we could not adequately describe how long the project was going to take, nor could we adequately describe the entire scope of services that would be required.
Yes. Yes, and we've experienced this in Colorado with Wolf Creek Reservoir up north in the Northwest. It was about a decade just going through that NEPA process before it was ever, permitting was ever approved. We have funding to begin that, but there's still more processes that need to take place in that. So I don't even think $5 million is a drop in the bucket, but at least we're making progress. So to eliminate some of those burdensome regulations and the frivolous lawsuits, I think would be extremely beneficial. Now, Mr. Jakins, you stated that the current NEPA landscape of years-long unconstrained reviews followed by extended litigation makes it difficult for your co-ops to conduct the necessary basic maintenance and vegetation management operations in a timely fashion. Would you agree that the current regulatory framework increases the risk of adverse events like wildfires?
Yes, I would.
Yes, yeah. Well, in Colorado, we're coming off some of the worst wildfires seasons in history, and it certainly doesn't seem to help that it takes the Forest Service an average of 3.6 years to begin mechanical treatment and nearly 5 years to begin the prescribed burn under NEPA. And just my final question here, my last few seconds, Ms. Reams, the Biden's regime CEQ's Phase 2 regulations add burdens to an already overburdened NEPA process. Can you expand briefly, while my time's expiring, upon what reforms CEQ should implement to better align with the law and the congressional intent?
Well, the intent also was, it was supposed to be simplifying, then we had a 430-page document to simplify. So I think one of the pieces that's important on this document, this piece is that it does not reduce community engagement. It continues community engagement, which we all agree we need. So I think there's just some mischaracterization about what this does, would be my quickest answer.
Yes, I think only Congress and bureaucrats could simplify in 435 pages. Thank you all so much for your time, and I apologize for going over. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Before we go on to our last speaker, I do want to enter into the record this chart here. This is the federal approval process.
This is Ms. Boebert from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The failure in our immigration system is a wide open southern border. There are folks who are waiting in a so-called line. As Mr. Boebert said, most countries do not have a line. They have a lottery, and they're banned from even applying. We have the most generous system in the world for bringing in legal immigrants into our country. And it's so interesting, fascinating to hear my colleagues on the other side of the aisle debate this and counter every other argument that they have in their policies. They're saying they want economic growth, and the only way to get so is through indentured servitude, is through putting moms and their children in the hands of cartel, who, Mr. Homan, you have said that it's the cartel who have operational control at our southern border. Is that not correct, sir?
They absolutely do.
So we are going to risk putting lives in the hands of the cartel to bolster our economy. My colleague just asked if our birth rate was declining here in America, and the answer was yes. Well, of course it is. We have nearly 1 million abortions in our country a year, over 60 million abortions since this has been illegal. And if that's an issue, well, then we need to address that. If we want an incline in our birth rate, well, let's look at our own country first, rather than putting folks in the hands of the cartel and putting their lives in danger so they can do, as my colleagues on the other side of the aisle say, pick our fruit, pick our crops. Aren't the folks who are coming here to seek the American dream deserving of the American dream? Or are they only deserving to clean our toilets, fold our beds in our hotels, the sheets, and pick our crops? I think the American dream is worth much more than that, and that's why we are the most generous nation in the world when it comes to legal immigration, accepting nearly 1 million legal immigrants each year. Now, Mr. Homan, as someone who oversaw a significant downturn in illegal border crossings under the Trump administration, what do you believe has been the biggest driver in skyrocketing increase of illegal immigration through our southern border under the Biden administration?
The Biden administration's policies, catch and release. They know they cross the border illegally, they'll be processed in record time because the administration keeps sending more resources to the border, not to secure the border, but to process and release. Right. As long as they know they can cross the border, be released, get flown or transported to the city of their choice at taxpayers' dime, get lodging, health care, 3 squares a day, they're going to keep coming because there's no consequence.
Thank you, Mr. Homan. Now, in Colorado, we've seen fentanyl deaths absolutely explode, and thousands of illegal aliens shipped into my state of Colorado. How do you think that the American family has been most impacted by the failure of this administration to secure a border and keep this, what I could consider a weapon of mass destruction, out of our country?
Well, it's a poison, and there's a couple of things. First of all, I haven't seen this administration hold China accountable for providing the precursors that the cartels in Mexico used to create this poison. I haven't seen any accountability of this administration holding Mexico accountable for not taking on the criminal cartels. And the fact is, about 300 children are going to die every day, hundreds every day, and this is not going to stop with an open border. Because despite what people have said here today, I've done this for 34 years. I've investigated criminal cartels. Much of the fentanyl is coming through the port of entry. I don't argue that. Most of the fentanyl is seized at a port of entry because that's where they stop every vehicle. But between the port of entries and maritime from the Coast Guard, you can't make a statement saying most of the fentanyl comes to the port of entry when you don't know what the hell is coming between the port of entry, especially when most Border Patrol agents are no longer on patrol. I testified earlier, I've been to several sectors in the past year where every single Border Patrol agent was pulled off the line for days. 100 miles of border. The criminal cartel is going to use the route of least resistance, and that's where there is a law enforcement officer.
Yes, Mr. Homan, that's a great point because we do hear about the ports of entry a lot in this committee room, but we don't know what's coming across the border where it is wide open and there are not Border Patrol agents. And I love that you also highlighted the fact that the funding that's going to our border is simply to process more illegal aliens, not to secure our border. Now, going back to Colorado, Jose Guadalupe Manivar Alas, an illegal alien, forgive my pronunciation of his name, but he's an illegal alien who has 4 previous convictions in Colorado for alcohol-related driving offenses and was previously deported 4 times and recently crashed his vehicle and killed a 47-year-old woman, Melissa Powell, and her 16-year-old son. The Biden regime absolutely has blood on its hands for their failure to secure our border and actually hold this criminal alien accountable, and is resulting in the deaths of women and children here. There's many excuses that we hear from the other side, and unfortunately one of them is to bolster our economy and that our Social Security system is going to decline. Mr. Beyer, you said that we have to raise taxes on the American citizen.
No, definitely not.
You said taxes will have to go up to fund the federal government.
That's what I expect Congress will do.
Well, if I'm here, we won't.
Good. Thank you.
But this is something that we have to address so we are not having to fund $200 million annually in illegal aliens in my state of Colorado alone. Gentlemen, I thank you so much for your time here, for your testimonies, and for getting information to the American people, and I hope we get the southern border secured quickly.
Boebert from Colorado for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Regan, is it true that the EPA has never obtained formal authorization legislation from Congress?
I'm sorry?
Is it true that the EPA has never obtained formal legislation, authorization legislation from Congress? It's never been authorized by Congress.
EPA is not authorized by Congress?
I'm asking you.
I thought EPA was authorized by Congress.
Well, the EPA is not. The EPA has never been formally authorized by Congress. However, this agency has imposed over $1.3 trillion in regulatory costs since the Biden regime took office. We authorize committees here in Congress to ensure that we have proper oversight and accountability in the functioning of the executive branch. And this process is extremely vital because often we see agencies abuse the separation of powers, creating rules and laws, regulations without consent of Congress. And we appropriate funds to agencies like the EPA and expect these tax dollars and this tax dollar funding to be used in accordance with the legislative priorities and comply with the oversight requirements. So, Mr. Regan, last month, the Supreme Court rightly overturned the Chevron doctrine, which the EPA relied on to support its very controversial and costly rulemakings. Since your agency has never been authorized by Congress and has since lost most legal standing, does your agency still plan to enable rogue bureaucrats to enact unconstitutional regulations?
I'm not quite sure I follow you. You're saying that...
I'm saying the Chevron doctrine was overturned by the Supreme Court.
We have no authority?
I'm saying you've never been authorized. Wait, hold on.
Congress doesn't delegate authority for us to do the regulations and the business and the policy. So since 1970...
So the Chevron doctrine, where you have created all of these rules under that have been proven to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court has been overruled. So now I'm asking, are your bureaucrats still going to implement these rulemaking processes?
You do know Chevron is not just focused on EPA. So,
But you are. So I'm asking about the EPA, and I'm asking about your rogue bureaucrats that have enacted these unconstitutional regulations. Are you going to repeal them? Are you going to continue to implement them, or are you going to stop altogether since it's been overturned?
do you understand the ruling?
Do you understand the
I
ruling
do.
of the Supreme Court?
I do. And so your question is ill-formed. No.
Will you
we're
be
not
repealing?
We're not going to stop.
So you're going to unconstitutionally continue with these
We're going to
rulemakings.
We're going to adhere to the
EPA.
Supreme Court and continue to
So
do
which
continue to do
rulemakings are you going to roll back?
We're going to adhere to the Supreme Court and continue to do our work in accordance to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court
So which
made a
ones are you
ruling.
going to repeal?
The Supreme Court didn't tell us to repeal anything.
They have been deemed unconstitutional.
No.
Absolutely, they have. This was a huge victory. And, even in our appropriations bill in the House this year, the funding has been reduced by 20%. I would argue that it needs to be reduced by 100%. But in this, it's because of these radical Green New Deal policies that jeopardize domestic energy development and overload America's power grid and raise costs on American consumers and businesses. So with the EPA and these overreaching regulations, do you have any intent on working with the House majority to lower energy costs and produce more reliable and affordable energy?
If you look at our rule, we are producing reliable, affordable, diverse.
I think Americans' wallets would disagree with that. I mean, the Biden administration, if they continue under Obama's administrative policies, this regulatory pace for a full 8 years, the cumulative cost of this administration's rulemakings would exceed $60,000 per household. And as you know, the Biden administration reversed President Trump's successful deregulation by executive order. So the Biden regime is on pace of increasing regulatory costs at a rate of $617 billion per year in just rulemaking. Rulemaking that we are seeing is unconstitutional.
It's just shocking. You spend so much time with our regional staff and regional administration in Region 8 and have such productive conversations about how we're doing things for your district and your state, and then you take this microphone and you
I've also seen the coal plants that have been decommissioned in my state.
But 100% we should not
I've
exist.
seen the energy regulations that have regulated my district into poverty.
You're spending time with my staff.
Sure.
In your district.
Of course I am. I have oversight over your staff, and I want them to answer. I want them to provide a service for the American people.
Complimenting them
but there
about
are
the
so much.
partnerships.
Yes, there are some things that have been done well, but
we
not
should be
everything.
100%
When we
removed?
have $617 billion per year in rulemaking, that is absolutely absurd. When you are taking our affordable clean energy and regulating it out of existence and killing these good-paying jobs in my district, yes, I have a problem with that.
Sure. Yeah.
My time has expired, and I yield.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I think that was 46 seconds over, so we'll take that. Thank you.
Mr. Raskin, if we're going to start timing people over, then you're going to have to start editing your comments on your opening statements and everything else. But I will do that.
Thank you, kindly.
All right. Chair recognized.
From Colorado, Ms. Boebert, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Holland, is it the department's practice to use, my time is still here.
Gentlelady, suspend.
We're going to reset the clock.
And please reset the clock.
We'll have fun later, Jared. Secretary Holland, is it the department's practice to use the best available science in rulemaking? Science, data, facts?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Yes, we always work to use
Will you commit
the
to
best
using the best available science, meaning the 2016 USGS study, when finalizing the Colorado River Field Office and Grand Junction Field Office RMP?
We will, we always work to use the best science available, Congresswoman.
I would disagree, but last summer, the department issued a draft resource management plan to lock up 1.6 million acres from responsible oil and gas production in Colorado and in my district. Unfortunately, the analysis in the draft RMP relies on an outdated USGS study from 2002 instead of a more up-to-date analysis conducted in 2016. So, Secretary Holland, how is locking up 1.6 million acres out of 1.9 million acres from oil and gas production. How is this going to ensure lands are managed for multiple use and sustained yield?
Congresswoman, I'm not quite sure specifically which acres you're referring to.
1.6 million acres in western Colorado. And it sounds like this is just another strategy the department is employing to lock up more lands across the West and undermine American energy dominance. Now, are you not familiar with the monument designation that's being proposed?
Are you talking of
I'm talking about 1.6 million acres, and it's kind of...
Are you speaking of the Thompson Divide area?
I'm not. So Secretary Holland, I strongly oppose this misguided effort by extremists to designate this national monument in the Dolores River corridor and its surrounding areas in southwest Colorado. And it's very concerning that you're not familiar with what's going on. The senators have had press conferences there. There's been public comment. I have constituents like Sean Pond who are talking about this each and every day and reaching out to your offices without a response, trying to protect these lands for multiple use. And they're being absolutely ignored on this. And, well, I have a letter here for you. And typically when I do send letters, I get some sort of half response from staff. And so I would like to hand this to you directly today.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you, Secretary Holland. And with this letter, there's more information about this monument. And I want to just iterate here that Senator Bennett and I, we have a bipartisan community-led bill to protect the Dolores River corridor without a national monument designation. And I need you to commit to Coloradans to working with us on this particular bill and oppose this unilateral land grab that will cause harm to the people who live there. And I just want to say, disregarding the agreements that have been achieved on a bipartisan basis and the much time that has been invested in this Dolores NCA, this would be a complete insult to Southwest Colorado, and it would contradict the DOI's direct description of the Antiquities Act, which I have quoted there in my letter. And so, Secretary Holland, the department is asking for an additional $2.8 million. You know what? I'm not even going to go into this right now. I mean, this is just more DOI and civil rights issues, but I really want to stay focused on the land here. But I need to know that you are looking into this issue, are familiar with the 1.6 million acre land grab that is being proposed, and will have conversations and responses to actually working on this bipartisan Dolores NCA that the senators of Colorado and I have been diligently working on with stakeholders who are local and familiar with this area to prevent this national monument land grab, this designation.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for the letter. I will read it when I get back to my office. I also am happy to know that you're working with your senators. As you know, I've been to Colorado many, many times. We care about your state, and I appreciate your hard work.
We care about our state, and we care about the multiple uses that take place on our public lands. This is the people's land, and at every turn, the federal government is trying to lock up more and prevent this multiple use, prevent the mineral resources from being produced, prevent recreation, and this designation is going to further harm Western Colorado. And just while I have you in my last few seconds, you've made multiple references to the 30 by 30 land and water grab in your testimony. How much taxpayer money does your department plan to spend or waste this fiscal year in pandering to the enviros in this pursuit of this radical initiative?
Thank you, Congresswoman. The America the Beautiful initiative is just that. It's an initiative. It's not a line item in our budget whatsoever, but we feel that the work that we're doing essentially moves the initiative forward.
I do
Ladies, time has expired.
America the Beautiful, locking up land and water from sea to shining sea.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair